Introduction. Every situation you face in life, whether a heated argument, a tough business decision, a betrayal, or a financial crisis, demands more than emotion or instinct. It demands clarity. It demands the ability to think beyond the obvious, to see through confusion, and to choose wisely even when pressure clouds your judgment. This audiobook is your guide to developing that clarity, the kind that separates people who crumble under chaos from those who rise above it. The truth is, the most powerful asset you possess is not your money, your connections, or your background. It's your mind. The way you think determines the quality of your life, your relationships, and the results you produce in every sphere. Yet, most people go through life on autopilot, driven by emotions, habits, and social conditioning rather than deliberate reasoning. They respond instead of analyzing, assume instead of questioning, and react instead of reflecting. The result is a pattern of repeated mistakes, poor decisions, and wasted opportunities. This audiobook was created to break that cycle. It is designed to train your brain to become a disciplined, strategic, and creative powerhouse. It teaches you to think with depth instead of haste, to reason with both heart and logic, and to make choices that align with long-term wisdom rather than short-term gratification. You will learn to pause, analyze, and dissect problems from multiple angles, to outthink obstacles before they outsmart you. Critical thinking is not just an academic skill. It is a survival skill. In a world overloaded with information, opinions, and manipulation, the ability to discern truth from noise is priceless. Every day you are bombarded with headlines designed to provoke emotion, people who project half-truths as facts, and circumstances that pressure you to act without thinking. The untrained mind reacts. The trained mind responds with intelligence. The purpose of this audiobook is to help you become the latter, to transform your brain into an instrument of precision, calm, and insight. Training your brain is not about memorizing theories or sounding intelligent in conversations. It is about rewiring your mental habits, how you perceive, interpret, and respond to the world. It begins with awareness, understanding how your thoughts are formed, how biases influence them, and how emotions distort them. Once you gain control over your own mind, you gain control over everything that used to control you: fear, confusion, pressure, and indecision. This journey will challenge you to confront the way you think. It will push you to question your assumptions, expose your blind spots, and dismantle mental shortcuts that keep you trapped in repetitive mistakes. You will discover that intelligence alone is not enough. Wisdom is in how you use intelligence. Critical thinking is the art of using reason and emotion harmoniously, to balance logic with empathy, strategy with intuition, and vision with practicality. Throughout these chapters, you will learn that every situation, good or bad, is a mental game first. You'll see how the mind can be trained like a muscle to handle uncertainty, complexity, and manipulation. You will also learn how to think several steps ahead, anticipate challenges, and adapt creatively when plans collapse. Whether you're trying to negotiate a business deal, navigate conflict in your relationship, or make life-changing choices, this audiobook equips you with tools to outsmart chaos with composure and clarity. By the end of this audiobook, you will not only have improved your critical thinking skills, you will have evolved your entire way of living. You will approach problems differently, listen more deeply, speak more purposefully, and make decisions with conviction. You will learn to pause where others panic, to analyze where others assume, and to respond with precision where others react in confusion. That is what it means to outsmart any situation, not because life becomes easier, but because you become wiser. Welcome to the training ground of the mind. Welcome to the art of thinking with precision and purpose. Chapter 1. The Power of a Trained Mind. The greatest victories in life are not first won on the battlefield, in business, or in conversation. They are won in the mind. Every success or failure you have ever experienced began as a thought. Before a person gives up, they have already surrendered mentally. Before someone succeeds, they have already conquered self-doubt in their inner world. The mind is the quiet workshop of every destiny, and those who learn to train it possess a kind of power that external circumstances cannot shake. To train your brain is to reclaim authority over what goes on inside your head. Most people assume they are in control of their thoughts, But in truth, their minds are often running on autopilot, reacting to the environment, driven by habit, emotion, or fear. They live as passive participants in their own mental theater, unaware that the brain is constantly rewiring itself based on what they focus on, what they believe, and how they respond to experiences. Modern neuroscience has revealed an astonishing truth. The human brain is not fixed. It changes. It grows. It reorganizes. This process, known as neuroplasticity, means that your brain literally reshapes its neural pathways in response to how you use it. Every repeated thought strengthens a particular neural connection. Every habit, whether good or bad, creates a pattern that becomes easier to repeat next time. In other words, the more you think a certain way, the more your brain becomes wired to continue thinking that way. You are sculpting your own mental architecture every single day, often without realizing it. Think of your brain as a field. Every thought you entertain is like a seed. If you keep planting seeds of worry, self-doubt, and negativity, that is what will grow, dense, thorny weeds that choke your potential. But if you deliberately plant thoughts of calm, clarity, and resilience, those will take root and become your default state. The brain does not discriminate between what is beneficial or harmful. It simply reinforces whatever you give consistent attention to. That is why awareness is the first step toward mastery. Training your brain begins with awareness of your mental patterns. You cannot change what you do not notice. The majority of your thoughts today are not new. They are recycled from yesterday. They are the same worries, judgments, and automatic reactions that have been reinforced for years. Most people live in this loop of mental repetition without ever questioning it. Their thoughts trigger emotions. Those emotions reinforce the thoughts, and the cycle continues until it becomes their reality. Breaking this loop requires the courage to observe your mind instead of merely being it. When you start to observe your thoughts, you step into a higher level of consciousness. You begin to notice that not every thought deserves your belief. Some are echoes of fear, some are learned from others, and some are outdated mental programs that no longer serve your growth. This simple act of awareness begins to loosen the grip of negative thinking. The more often you do it, the stronger your inner observer becomes, the part of you that watches without judgment, that pauses before reacting, and that chooses clarity over chaos. A trained mind is not about suppressing emotions or becoming robotic. It is about achieving balance. It allows you to feel deeply without being controlled by those feelings. It teaches you to respond with wisdom rather than react with impulse. Emotional intelligence grows in the soil of a disciplined mind, and discipline begins with mental clarity. When your mind is trained, focus becomes effortless, distractions lose their power, and challenges are seen not as threats, but as opportunities to apply strategy. Neuroplasticity works both ways. It can build you or break you. The same brain that can learn new languages, solve complex problems, and heal from trauma can also reinforce fear, procrastination, and anxiety if that is what it constantly practices. Every time you give energy to unproductive thoughts, complaints, self-pity, or resentment, you are strengthening those neural pathways. The good news is that you can consciously rewire them. Through intention and repetition, you can train your brain to think in alignment with who you want to become rather than who you used to be. Consider how athletes train their bodies for endurance. They repeat specific movements, build muscle memory, and push past comfort until what was once difficult becomes second nature. Mental training works the same way. Focus is a muscle. Patience is a muscle. Resilience, perspective, and composure are all mental muscles that grow with consistent exercise. The more you practice calm thinking in chaos, the easier it becomes. The more you practice analyzing before judging, the more natural it feels. Over time, your mind becomes conditioned to clarity the way a trained athlete's body becomes conditioned to performance. To truly appreciate the power of a trained mind, you must first understand the cost of an untrained one. An untrained mind is restless, reactive, and easily deceived. It is swayed by emotion, addicted to distraction, and quick to believe its own fears. It interprets every challenge as a threat and every delay as defeat. But when you train your mind, you start seeing through illusions. You realize that most fears are mental constructions, not realities. You recognize manipulation when it comes dressed as persuasion. You learn to wait, to think, and to act with precision rather than haste. Mental training also sharpens perception. You start noticing things others overlook, the tone behind words, the motive behind actions, the pattern behind outcomes. This depth of awareness is what allows you to outthink difficult situations. Where others see confusion, you see structure. Where others see failure, you see feedback. Your mind becomes like a clean mirror, reflecting truth without distortion. The journey to mental mastery begins with small, consistent acts of awareness. Set aside moments in your day to simply watch your thoughts without judgment. Notice what you often dwell on. Ask yourself whether those thoughts serve your growth or weaken it. When faced with stress, pause before reacting. Observe your emotional triggers. These moments of stillness may seem insignificant, but they are how transformation begins. Every pause creates space for clarity, and every moment of clarity rewires your brain towards stability. Another powerful practice is focus training. Choose one simple task, reading, journaling, or breathing, and give it your full attention for a few minutes. Each time your mind wanders, gently bring it back. This act of returning builds concentration. Over time, your mind becomes less scattered and more obedient. You'll notice that distractions lose their grip, and your mental energy becomes available for deeper thinking. The mind is like a wild horse. It will run in every direction until you learn to hold the reins. Training your brain does not happen overnight. It requires patience, persistence, and compassion for yourself. There will be days your thoughts feel chaotic, days when focus seems impossible, and days when emotions cloud your reasoning. But remember, every attempt counts. Every moment of awareness is a victory. With time, you'll begin to notice a shift. Your reactions slowing, your thinking deepening, your inner calm strengthening. The power of a trained mind lies not in what it knows, but in what it can handle. It is the ability to stay centered when others panic, to think clearly when emotions are high, and to make sound choices in the middle of uncertainty. Such a mind does not need to control everything. It simply knows how to control itself. And once you can control your inner world, the outer world becomes infinitely easier to navigate. This is the foundation upon which every other skill in this book is built. Before you can become strategic, analytical, or creatively intelligent, you must first learn to master awareness. You must become familiar with your own thoughts, emotions, and biases. The chapters that follow will take you deeper into the mechanics of how your brain interprets reality and how to use that understanding to make sharper, wiser, and more balanced decisions. But it all begins here, with training the most powerful instrument you possess. The mind is both the battlefield and the weapon. Master it, and you become unstoppable. Chapter 2. Breaking Free from Mental Traps. Every human being lives in two worlds, the outer world of events and the inner world of perception. The first is what happens. The second is how we interpret what happens. And more often than not, it is our interpretation, not the event itself, that determines our peace of mind, our reactions, and our decisions. The problem is that our minds are not neutral observers. They are colored by hidden biases, shortcuts, and emotional filters that quietly twist our view of reality. These unseen distortions are called mental traps, and they are the invisible strings that control most of human behavior. A mental trap is any thought pattern that makes us mistake assumption for truth. It is the voice in the head that whispers you're right, even when you're not. It's the comfort of believing what feels familiar, even when the facts say otherwise. It's the emotional reasoning that convinces you someone hates you just because they disagreed with you. These traps do not announce themselves. They live quietly beneath awareness, shaping choices, relationships, and even destinies. The goal of this chapter is to shine light into that shadowy space, to make you see how your mind can deceive you and how to reclaim control over it. One of the most powerful mental traps is confirmation bias. This is the tendency of the human mind to seek, interpret, and remember information that confirms what it already believes. If you think a colleague dislikes you, your mind will automatically highlight every neutral action as evidence of hostility. A missed greeting becomes proof A delayed message becomes intentional. Meanwhile, all the evidence that contradicts that belief is ignored. Confirmation bias makes us prisoners of our own opinions. It locks us inside a world where we only see what we want to see and hear what we want to hear. This bias explains why debates rarely change anyone's mind. People don't listen to understand. They listen to defend. It's why some individuals can be shown overwhelming facts and still cling to their original belief. The mind loves consistency more than truth. It wants to feel right, not necessarily be right. The moment you realize this, you gain power. You begin to question not just what you think, but why you think it. You start asking, am I seeking truth, or am I seeking comfort? That simple question is the doorway out of this trap. Another powerful mental snare is overconfidence bias. It's the illusion that we know more than we do, or that our judgment is superior to others. It manifests in the person who ignores advice because, I've got this, in the driver who insists they can text safely while driving, or in the professional who refuses feedback because they believe they've mastered their craft. Overconfidence blinds us to learning, to caution, and to growth. It makes us mistake intuition for infallibility. History is filled with examples of brilliant people who failed because they believed they couldn't be wrong. Empires have fallen, businesses have collapsed, and relationships have shattered under the weight of unchecked confidence. A trained mind learns humility not as weakness, but as wisdom, the awareness that no one, no matter how intelligent, sees the full picture. The cure for overconfidence is curiosity. The moment you stop assuming you already know, you begin to discover what you never did. Then there is groupthink, the collective form of self-deception. It happens when the desire for harmony within a group becomes stronger than the desire for truth. People silence their doubts, ignore their instincts, and follow the crowd to avoid standing out. You see it in boardrooms, classrooms, friendships, and even families. The group rewards conformity and punishes dissent, not realizing that progress always begins with someone who dares to disagree. Groupthink can make smart people do foolish things because it replaces individual thought with emotional safety. Groupthink is dangerous because it feels so right. There's comfort in belonging, in being accepted, in not having to carry the weight of independent judgment. But the price of that comfort is authenticity. You lose your voice, your reasoning, and your integrity. To escape this trap, you must learn the courage to think alone, to stand apart when everyone else seems united in error. True wisdom does not fear isolation. It fears blindness disguised as unity. Another subtle but deeply powerful trap is fear-based reasoning. Fear is one of the brain's oldest survival mechanisms. It was designed to protect us from danger, but in the modern world, it often misfires. The body reacts to emotional threats, failure, rejection, change, as if they were physical dangers. The mind begins to catastrophize, turning simple possibilities into certain doom. We overthink, overanalyze, and talk ourselves out of opportunities because fear magnifies risk and minimizes potential. Fear-based reasoning is deceptive because it feels rational. You can justify it with logic. It's not the right time. What if it doesn't work? I should play it safe. But beneath those words lies a shrinking mindset, one that confuses comfort with safety. When fear governs thought, it disguises itself as caution, when in truth, it's avoidance. To outsmart fear, you must learn to see it for what it is, a signal, not a verdict. The goal is not to eliminate fear, but to separate it from your reasoning, to let it inform you without dictating your choices. What makes these mental traps so dangerous is that they operate in silence. They don't shout, they whisper. They live in the quiet assumptions that shape your view of the world. They tell you that you already know enough, that others think like you, that safety lies in the familiar. And unless you make a habit of questioning your thoughts, you will never see the strings that pull you. Awareness, therefore, is liberation. To develop the calm objectivity of a critical thinker, you must become a student of your own mind. Pay attention to the moments you become defensive when someone challenges your beliefs. That is confirmation bias at work. Notice when you dismiss feedback because it bruises your ego. That's overconfidence bias. Observe when you agree with the group despite inner hesitation. That's groupthink. Recognize when fear dresses up as logic. That's emotional reasoning in disguise. The power lies not in resisting these biases, but in noticing them. The act of noticing breaks their spell. Once you observe your own thought patterns, they begin to lose their control. You become less reactive, more reflective, and far more capable of making clear decisions. That is the essence of mental freedom, to think without being unconsciously manipulated by your own psychology. Consider how this awareness changes daily life. In relationships, you stop assuming motives and start asking questions. In business, you begin to analyze data instead of relying on hunches. In personal goals, you replace fear-based hesitation with calculated strategy. Every aspect of life improves when thinking becomes conscious. You move from reacting to reasoning, from guessing to understanding, from confusion to clarity. Developing objectivity does not mean abandoning emotion. It means separating emotion from interpretation. It is learning to feel deeply but think clearly. When something provokes anger or fear, pause and ask yourself, what story am I telling myself about this situation? And is that story true? This pause creates space between stimulus and response. In that space lies power, the power to choose a better thought, and therefore a better outcome. The calm objectivity of a critical thinker is not cold detachment. It is emotional mastery. It is the ability to stay centered when others are consumed by panic, to listen when others argue, and to think when others rush. It is the mental discipline to remain steady in the face of provocation, and to question one's own certainty in the pursuit of truth. Breaking free from mental traps is not a one-time event, but a lifelong practice. The mind will always lean toward bias because it seeks efficiency, not accuracy. But through awareness and reflection, you can learn to rise above those tendencies. Each time you catch yourself thinking in error and correct it, you rewire your brain toward clarity. Over time, you become the kind of person who does not just have thoughts, but one who masters them. The true strength of a trained mind lies in its humility. It knows that no matter how intelligent it becomes, it can still be deceived. It keeps learning, keeps questioning, and keeps evolving. When you learn to think in this way, life becomes clearer, not because it gets easier, but because your mind becomes sharper. You no longer stumble blindly through the maze of perception. You see the walls, the exits, and the illusions for what they are. That is the freedom that comes with awareness, the freedom to see reality as it is, not as fear, ego, or bias would have you see it. The moment you begin to think with that level of clarity, you are no longer trapped by your mind. You are finally using it, as it was always meant to be used, not as a cage, but as a tool for truth. Chapter 3. The Science of Smart Decision-Making. Every decision you make, from the smallest to the most life-altering, shapes the direction of your existence. The clothes you wear, the career you pursue, the people you trust, and the risks you take, all of these stem from one core skill, decision-making. Yet, few people ever stop to examine how they actually make decisions. Most assume it's simply a matter of thinking things through. But the reality is far more intricate. Your brain uses two distinct modes of thinking that constantly compete and collaborate within you. One fast, emotional, and instinctive. The other slow, deliberate, and analytical. Understanding the dance between these two systems is the foundation of smart decision-making. The human brain evolved not for perfection, but for survival. Long before logic and reasoning developed, early humans relied on instinct to stay alive. When a predator appeared, there was no time for analysis. The brain triggered immediate action. This instinctive, lightning-fast form of processing still governs much of human behavior today. Psychologists call it System 1 thinking, intuitive, automatic, and emotional. It helps you navigate daily routines, recognize patterns, and make split-second judgments without conscious effort. It's what allows you to drive a familiar route or sense danger without needing to analyze every detail. Then there is System 2 thinking, the deliberate, logical, and analytical process that takes effort and time. This is the mode you use when solving complex problems, making financial plans, or analyzing a contract. It's slower but more precise. System 2 questions assumptions, weighs evidence, and challenges impulsive conclusions made by System 1. Both systems are essential. The secret to smart decision-making is knowing when to trust intuition and when to slow down and reason things out. The tension between these two systems explains much of human inconsistency. We can be brilliant in one moment and reckless in the next. System 1 acts out of habit and emotion. It loves shortcuts and simplicity. System 2 demands energy and discipline. It prefers structure and depth. In moments of stress or fatigue, the brain naturally defaults to System 1, which is why people often make poor choices under pressure. They mistake emotion for intuition and speed for accuracy. Rational decision-making does not mean ignoring intuition. It means refining it. True intuition is not random guesswork. It is the brain's ability to recognize patterns from accumulated experience. A skilled doctor, for instance, can often sense what's wrong with a patient before running tests. Not because of magic, but because years of observation have trained their subconscious to detect subtle cues. However, intuition without reflection can also be deceptive. Emotions can masquerade as instinct, leading us into poor judgments dressed as gut feelings. The key is balance. Smart decision-makers integrate emotional intelligence with logical reasoning. They allow intuition to generate possibilities, but use analysis to test those possibilities. They ask, is this feeling based on experience, or is it based on fear, bias, or wishful thinking? That single moment of reflection often separates impulsive errors from wise choices. At the heart of effective decision-making is the ability to evaluate evidence. The human mind loves certainty, but life rarely offers it. Smart thinkers learn to operate in the gray areas of probability rather than the black and white of certainty. They assess options not as right or wrong, but as more or less likely to succeed. This is where probability thinking comes in, a mindset that measures the odds of different outcomes and adjusts decisions accordingly. Imagine a poker player deciding whether to bet. They never know for sure what cards their opponent holds, but they calculate probabilities based on available information. They don't rely solely on emotion or data. They blend both. In life, you face similar uncertainty when choosing careers, investments, or relationships. You rarely have complete information, but you can learn to make decisions that maximize long-term gains and minimize unnecessary risks. Another powerful method used by successful decision-makers is the logic tree. A logic tree begins with a central question or problem and branches out into possible causes, effects, and solutions. This approach forces clarity. It breaks down complex problems into manageable parts. For example, if a business is losing customers, a logic tree helps dissect the issue. Is it pricing? Is it customer experience? Is it competition? Is it marketing strategy? By mapping possibilities, you prevent your mind from leaping to conclusions and instead ground your thinking in structure analysis. In the world of high-stakes decisions, medicine, aviation, finance, or leadership, the ability to combine emotional balance with logical structure is the hallmark of excellence. Take, for instance, the story of Captain Chesley Sully Sullenberger, the pilot who safely landed a disabled plane on the Hudson River after both engines failed. In a matter of seconds, Sully had to process the impossible: no power, no runway, and hundreds of lives at stake. He relied on intuition born from decades of experience to act swiftly, but he also analyzed his limited options with stunning precision. He didn't panic. He assessed the probability of survival with each maneuver and chose the only viable path. His decision was not luck. It was the seamless union of instinct and analysis. Contrast that with the 2008 financial crisis, where emotional greed and overconfidence drowned out rational evaluation. Banks ignored evidence of risk because profits created the illusion of invincibility. System 1 thinking, driven by reward and momentum, overpowered System 2's caution. The result was a global collapse rooted not in ignorance, but in undisciplined decision-making. These real-world examples reveal a universal truth. Good judgment is not a gift, but a skill cultivated through self-awareness and reflection. The challenge of decision-making lies not just in choosing, but in seeing clearly. To see clearly, you must question assumptions. Every decision begins with a story you tell yourself about how the world works. That story might be based on experience, or on fear, habit, or social influence. The mind naturally creates narratives to simplify reality, but those narratives can be dangerously incomplete. Smart decision makers constantly ask, what am I assuming here? What evidence supports it? What might I be overlooking? This habit protects them from the invisible biases that sabotage judgment. Emotional intelligence plays a crucial role here. Emotion is not the enemy of logic. It is its partner. Emotions give decisions meaning. Without them, choices become mechanical and disconnected from human values. A good leader, for instance, must consider not only what is efficient, but what is ethical. Emotional awareness helps detect when fear or pride is coloring perception. It provides the sensitivity to understand others' motives and reactions, which is vital in negotiation, conflict, or teamwork. Research in neuroscience reveals that emotion and logic are not separate systems fighting each other. They are deeply intertwined. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for reasoning, and the limbic system, responsible for emotion, communicate constantly. When emotion is ignored, decision-making becomes cold and narrow. When emotion dominates, it becomes impulsive and reckless. The harmony between the two is where wisdom lives. A calm, emotionally aware mind can evaluate facts without losing empathy and can feel deeply without losing objectivity. Smart decision-making also requires what psychologists call metacognition, the ability to think about your own thinking. It means stepping back to observe how your mind is processing information. Are you being overly optimistic? Are you underestimating risk because of excitement? Are you dismissing an option because it feels uncomfortable rather than illogical? Metacognition transforms the decision-maker from a participant in thought to the overseer of thought. It is self-awareness applied to reasoning. When facing uncertainty, strong thinkers adopt what is called the decision journal approach. They record the reasoning behind major decisions, the data they used, the assumptions they made, the risks they anticipated. Months or years later, they revisit those notes to see where they were accurate and where they were misled. This practice builds mental precision and humility. Over time, they begin to notice patterns in their own decision-making, how emotion or bias interfered, and they learn to correct it. In real life, the smartest decisions are rarely the most dramatic ones. They're the quiet, calculated choices that compound over time. The person who learns to save a little each month, to pause before reacting, to analyze before committing. These are the micro decisions that lead to stability and success. Each one reinforces neural pathways of discipline and clarity, strengthening the mind's ability to choose wisely under pressure. Making better decisions does not mean eliminating uncertainty. It means learning to navigate it intelligently. You will never have perfect information, but you can train yourself to recognize patterns, estimate probabilities, and adjust as new data emerges. Decision-making is not a single act. It is a living process of observation, reflection, and adaptation. The more you practice this, the more intuitive it becomes. The science of smart decision-making is the science of self-mastery. It is the ability to combine logic and emotion, speed and patience, intuition and evidence, into a unified process of clarity. It is learning to pause in a world that pushes for haste, to question in a world that rewards conformity, and to remain calm when others are ruled by impulse. Every wise choice you make strengthens your mental architecture, and every poor one, when examined honestly, becomes a lesson that refines it. Over time, you stop fearing decisions. You begin to trust your process, not just your feelings. You develop a quiet confidence, the kind that comes from knowing your mind is trained to think clearly, even when the world around you is uncertain. That is the essence of smart decision-making. Not perfection, but awareness. The ability to stand at a crossroads and see, not just the path before you, but the thought process guiding your steps. When your mind reaches that level of harmony between reason and emotion, you no longer merely make decisions. You create direction. And that, in itself, is the mark of an intelligent and awakened mind. Chapter 4, Strategic Thinking, Seeing the Bigger Picture. There is a difference between being intelligent and being strategic. Intelligence helps you solve problems as they appear. Strategic thinking helps you anticipate problems before they appear. It is the difference between reacting to life and directing it. Those who master strategic foresight rarely find themselves cornered, because they are always thinking several moves ahead. They understand that every action has a ripple effect, that every choice today shapes the options of tomorrow, and that clarity of thought is the compass that prevents chaos from turning into catastrophe. To think strategically is to step outside the moment. It means rising above the noise of immediate pressure to see patterns, trends, and relationships that others overlook. Most people become trapped in the urgency of the present. They solve the problem in front of them without realizing it may create 3 new ones down the line. The strategic mind zooms out. It sees the whole board, not just the piece being moved. Like a master chess player, it recognizes that every decision is a move in a much larger game, and that the real skill lies not in reacting quickly, but in seeing further. Strategic thinking begins with perspective. It requires an understanding that life operates through interconnected systems. Actions, reactions, causes, and effects constantly influencing each other. When something goes wrong, the untrained thinker looks for a single reason. The strategic thinker looks for the network of reasons, the invisible web of habits, structures, and patterns that produce the outcome. This broader view allows them to fix not just the symptom, but the root cause. It is why great leaders, inventors, and problem solvers seem almost prophetic. They can see how small shifts today will shape the future landscape. One of the most powerful tools in developing this kind of foresight is the practice of pattern recognition. The human brain is wired to seek patterns. It's how we learn languages, navigate environments, and detect danger. But in the hands of a strategic thinker, pattern recognition becomes an art. They notice behavioral patterns in people, market patterns in business, emotional patterns in relationships, and even mental patterns in themselves. They understand that what has repeated in the past will likely repeat again unless consciously redirected. By studying these recurring dynamics, they learn to predict outcomes and make smarter choices before the need for reaction arises. Strategic thinking also demands the discipline to delay gratification. It asks you to choose long-term gain over short-term comfort. While the reactive mind seeks immediate relief, solving what hurts now, the strategic mind sacrifices convenience for control. It asks questions like, if I take this step today, how will it affect me in a year? What consequences might this choice trigger? What am I overlooking because I want quick results? This way of thinking slows the impulsive rhythm of decision-making and replaces it with calculated intent. An essential part of strategic thinking is adaptability. Plans rarely unfold perfectly. Circumstances change, people change, and information evolves. The rigid mind crumbles under surprise. The strategic mind adjusts. It does not see change as chaos, but as data, feedback that reveals which part of the plan needs refinement. In this way, flexibility becomes a strength, not a sign of uncertainty. The most effective strategists are not those who predict perfectly, but those who recover quickly. They evolve faster than their challenges. To make this mindset practical, many thinkers and professionals use structured frameworks that sharpen their analysis. One of the most effective is the SWOT framework, an acronym for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It's a way of mapping out any situation, personal, professional, or organizational, by examining it from multiple perspectives. When you know your strengths, you can leverage them. When you identify your weaknesses, you can protect or improve them. When you recognize opportunities, you can act with foresight. And when you anticipate threats, you can prepare rather than panic. SWOT thinking moves you from emotional reaction to logical observation. It forces you to take inventory of reality rather than fantasy. In everyday life, this might mean analyzing your career path, your relationships, or your business decisions through this lens. By honestly evaluating where you stand, you gain the clarity to design where you're going. A strategic mind doesn't hope for the best. It prepares for it. Another powerful framework introduced in this chapter is first principles thinking, popularized by philosophers like Aristotle and revived in modern times by innovators such as Elon Musk. First principles thinking is the art of breaking down complex problems into their most fundamental truths and then reasoning up from there. Instead of asking, what has always been done, It asks, what do we actually know to be true? This kind of thinking dismantles assumptions and builds fresh perspectives from the ground up. Imagine you want to build a faster vehicle. Most people would look at existing cars and try to improve them incrementally. A first principles thinker, however, strips the concept of car down to its essence. What is the purpose of a vehicle? To move people from one place to another efficiently. From there, they might explore new materials, new power sources, or even entirely new forms of transport. This approach is why breakthroughs happen. It challenges inherited logic and replaces imitation with innovation. Strategic thinking thrives on such intellectual courage, the willingness to question norms that most people accept without reflection. Every advancement in science, business, or art began with someone refusing to think inside the old pattern. The great strategist is not content with the obvious. They ask deeper questions. They know that insight often hides beneath what everyone takes for granted. But thinking several steps ahead does not mean living in constant analysis. The strategic mind also values timing. It understands that there is a rhythm to action, a right moment to move, and a right moment to wait. In chess, even the most brilliant move fails if played too soon. Likewise, in life, strategy is as much about patience as it is about perception. Strategic thinkers develop an instinct for momentum. They know when to push forward and when to step back, when to engage and when to observe. This patience comes from confidence in their process. They don't rush decisions to quiet anxiety. They move only when clarity replaces impulse. Developing this mindset requires mental agility, the ability to switch perspectives fluidly and reframe problems creatively. When faced with obstacles, most people ask, why is this happening to me? The strategic thinker asks, what can this teach me? What angle am I not seeing? This reframing opens the mind to possibilities that were previously invisible. The moment you stop asking reactive questions and start asking strategic ones, your brain begins to expand its range of solutions. History is filled with examples of strategic minds who mastered this art of foresight. Consider Winston Churchill during World War II, who constantly thought beyond the immediate battle to anticipate the enemy's larger intent. Or business leaders like Steve Jobs, who didn't just react to consumer trends but foresaw what people would want before they knew it themselves. Their strength lay not in their intelligence alone, but in their ability to see connections, patterns, and outcomes hidden to others. In everyday life, strategic thinking can transform how you approach almost everything, from career growth to relationships. Instead of arguing to win a conversation, you think about preserving long-term trust. Instead of chasing every opportunity, you choose the few that align with your vision. You begin to realize that saying no strategically can be more powerful than saying yes reactively. Strategic thinking makes your life intentional. It gives you direction instead of drift. Developing this level of awareness can begin with simple exercises in foresight. At the end of each day, reflect on key decisions you made and consider their long-term effects. Ask yourself what might happen if you continued that choice for a month or a year. This trains your mind to extend its vision beyond the moment. Another useful exercise is scenario mapping, imagining different versions of the future based on your current path. By doing this, you become less reactive to change because you have already mentally prepared for multiple possibilities. Over time, this practice transforms how you experience life. You start noticing subtle shifts, people's motivations, the tone of conversations, the underlying causes of trends. You become less easily surprised because your mind has already considered the possibilities. You begin to respond from strategy, not stress. Strategic thinking is, at its core, a mindset of anticipation. It teaches you to stay calm in uncertainty, to think like a builder rather than a firefighter. You no longer chase every problem that arises. You design systems that prevent problems from arising in the first place. You learn to conserve your energy for what truly matters. And as your foresight strengthens, you begin to notice something remarkable. Life becomes less chaotic, not because it gets easier, but because you are now operating from clarity instead of confusion. The ultimate goal of strategic thinking is wisdom in motion, the ability to act with foresight, adapt with grace, and perceive with depth. It allows you to become proactive rather than reactive, deliberate rather than desperate. You begin to play the long game in a world obsessed with immediacy. You start to measure your success not by the speed of your wins, but by the endurance of your outcomes. To see the bigger picture is to rise above the noise of the moment. It is to stand on the balcony of perspective while others are lost in the crowd of confusion. Once you learn to think in this way, you stop merely surviving through challenges. You begin to orchestrate them. You become the strategist of your own life, the quiet architect of outcomes that others call luck. But you know are the results of foresight, patience, and disciplined thought. That is the power of seeing ahead. It's not about predicting the future. It's about being prepared for it. Chapter 5: Emotional Intelligence and Mental Discipline. The human mind is powerful, but without emotional discipline, it becomes its own worst enemy. Even the most logical person can make irrational choices when overwhelmed by emotion. Anger can blur truth, fear can distort judgment, and impatience can sabotage progress. True critical thinking, therefore, is not merely an intellectual exercise. It is an emotional one. The ability to reason clearly begins with the ability to remain calm. Emotional intelligence is the bridge between logic and clarity. It is the foundation that keeps a sharp mind steady when the heart begins to shake. Every thought is influenced by emotion. The way you interpret events, assess people, or even evaluate your own worth is filtered through how you feel in that moment. Yet emotions are not the enemy. They are signals. They carry valuable information about your needs, desires, and perceptions. Problems arise when you let those signals take control instead of interpreting them. Emotional intelligence teaches you to listen without surrendering, to feel deeply without being consumed. It is the art of balance, the mastery of your inner climate, so that your outer actions remain deliberate and wise. A person without emotional discipline is like a powerful ship without a rudder, driven by every wave of feeling, tossed between enthusiasm and despair, love and hate, confidence and insecurity. Such a mind cannot think clearly because clarity demands stillness. When you are agitated, reasoning becomes distorted. When you are fearful, your mind exaggerates danger. When you are angry, it seeks revenge instead of resolution. Emotional discipline begins with recognizing this simple truth. Emotions are temporary, but the consequences of emotionally driven decisions can last a lifetime. The first step toward emotional mastery is awareness. You cannot manage what you do not notice. Most people are not aware of how much their emotions govern their choices. They simply follow their mood. They say things they later regret, spend money to soothe stress, or abandon goals because they don't feel like it. Awareness interrupts this autopilot. When you pause to notice your internal state, to name what you are feeling, you take back the steering wheel of your mind. You create space between the emotion and the reaction. Mindfulness is one of the most powerful tools for developing this awareness. It is not about suppressing emotions, but observing them as they rise and fall, without judgment. When practiced regularly, mindfulness rewires the brain to respond, not react. Imagine standing beside a river watching emotions flow past like leaves drifting on the water. You see anger come and go, fear rise and fall, excitement swell and fade. You realize you are not the river. You are the observer. This separation grants power. The emotion may exist, but it no longer defines or dictates you. Mindfulness trains the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for reasoning and control, to stay active even in moments of stress. In contrast, when emotions dominate, the amygdala, the brain's alarm center, hijacks your responses. This amygdala hijack is why people lash out in anger or panic under pressure. By practicing mindful breathing or grounding techniques, you slow down this automatic response and bring rational thought back online. A few deep, deliberate breaths can often prevent hours of regret. Another essential skill for emotional regulation is self-talk reframing. The mind is constantly narrating your experiences, often with exaggeration or bias. When you make a mistake, your inner voice might say, "I'm such a failure." When faced with challenge, it whispers, "I can't handle this." Left unchecked, this inner dialogue becomes self-sabotage. Reframing means consciously changing the narrative. Instead of, "I can't handle this," you might say, "This is difficult, but I can learn through it." Instead of, "I failed," you could think, "This experience is teaching me resilience." This shift is not about blind positivity. It's about realistic empowerment, choosing words that encourage growth instead of defeat. Self-talk is the most intimate form of communication because it shapes your perception of reality. If you continuously speak to yourself with doubt or hostility, you train your brain to interpret life through fear. But when you cultivate encouraging, patient, and rational self-talk, you train your mind to stay grounded even when the world feels unstable. Over time, this practice creates mental discipline, the ability to remain steady inside, regardless of external turbulence. Delayed response is another cornerstone of emotional intelligence. In moments of conflict or stress, the instinct to react is powerful. You want to defend, explain, argue, or escape. Yet wisdom often hides in the pause. That brief delay between feeling and acting allows the rational mind to assess the situation. It's what separates emotional impulsivity from emotional maturity. The person who can pause before replying, who can breathe before deciding, gains a tremendous advantage in life. They are not slaves to emotion. They are stewards of it. Emotional intelligence also extends beyond self-control. It includes empathy, the ability to understand and feel what others experience without losing yourself in it. Empathy enhances clarity because it broadens perspective. When you can see through another's eyes, your judgments become fairer, your communication more effective, and your reasoning more compassionate. In leadership, empathy prevents arrogance. In relationships, it nurtures connection. It reminds you that every emotion, even those you find difficult in others, has a story behind it. Patience, too, is a form of emotional strength. In a world obsessed with speed, the ability to wait with calm intention is rare. Yet impatience is one of the most common destroyers of progress. It makes people quit before results arrive, speak before thinking, and decide before understanding. Patience is not passive. It is controlled energy. It is the steady rhythm that keeps your mind from burning out in the race toward instant gratification. A patient thinker sees time as an ally, not an enemy. They understand that every process, growth, healing, achievement, unfolds in its own rhythm. Resilience completes the trinity of emotional mastery. Where patience endures, resilience recovers. It is the strength to rise after disappointment, to adapt after loss, to rebuild with wisdom instead of bitterness. A resilient mind does not crumble under difficulty. It reorganizes itself. It uses pain as information rather than as identity. Resilience transforms adversity into insight, turning every fall into a lesson in balance. When emotional intelligence and mental discipline work together, the mind becomes both calm and sharp. It can analyze without losing compassion, decide without losing heart, and endure without losing focus. This is the true mark of maturity. To feel everything deeply but remain centered, to experience turbulence without being tossed around by it. Emotional discipline is not about numbing your feelings. It is about channeling them. Anger becomes assertiveness, fear becomes awareness, sadness becomes empathy, and passion becomes purpose. In high-pressure moments, when you're challenged, criticized, or overwhelmed, the disciplined mind does not collapse into chaos. It observes the rush of emotion, breathes through it, and waits for the wave to settle before taking action. This self-control is not coldness. It is power under control. It allows reason and emotion to coexist rather than compete. And it is this balance that defines the world's greatest thinkers, leaders, and creators. Developing emotional intelligence is a lifelong practice. It grows through reflection, humility, and honesty. Every time you catch yourself reacting impulsively and choose to pause instead, you are strengthening that inner muscle. Every time you respond with understanding instead of judgment, you are refining your emotional awareness. Each time you recover from setback without bitterness, you are proving that your emotions serve you, not enslave you. Ultimately, emotional discipline gives you freedom. The freedom to think clearly in moments when others lose control, the freedom to act with wisdom when others act out of fear. It transforms you from a prisoner of impulse into a master of choice. The emotionally intelligent mind does not eliminate feelings. It harnesses them as fuel for purpose, connection, and strength. When you reach this level of control, your thoughts become clearer, your relationships deeper, and your decisions more consistent. You no longer live at the mercy of mood swings or temporary frustration. You become stable, steady, and self-aware. Your emotions, once the storm, now become the wind that propels your sails in the direction you choose. Emotional intelligence and mental discipline are not luxuries. They are survival skills in a world designed to provoke reaction. To remain calm when others panic, thoughtful when others rush, and compassionate when others judge. That is the true power of a trained and emotionally intelligent mind. Chapter 6: Creative Problem Solving and Lateral Thinking. Every great breakthrough in history began with a mind that dared to think differently. When logic said, "It cannot be done," imagination whispered, "But what if it could?" Creative problem solving is the art of stepping beyond the boundaries of conventional thought to discover hidden possibilities. It is not about ignoring logic. It is about expanding it. It requires the courage to question assumptions, to combine unrelated ideas, and to see connections invisible to others. While intelligence analyzes what already exists, creativity imagines what could exist. Together, they form the true architecture of genius. The human brain is naturally creative. From childhood, curiosity drives us to explore, to ask questions, to imagine worlds beyond the visible. But as people grow older, society often teaches conformity, rules, routines, and rigid thinking. Slowly, imagination becomes confined by the need to be right, and the habit of exploration gives way to the comfort of certainty. Yet creativity is not a rare talent possessed by a few. It is a universal capacity that thrives wherever curiosity is alive. To rediscover it, one must unlearn the fear of being wrong and relearn the joy of asking what if. Creative problem solving begins with a shift in perception. Most problems persist not because they are unsolvable, but because they're being viewed from only one angle. When you change the lens, the entire picture changes. Lateral thinking, an idea popularized by Edward de Bono, describes this exact process, approaching challenges indirectly, from unexpected directions, instead of following the straight line of conventional reasoning. Logical, or vertical, thinking follows rules step by step. Lateral thinking jumps across them, exploring side routes and hidden pathways. It thrives on surprise and contradiction. The creative mind does not see obstacles as barriers, but as puzzles waiting for rearrangement. It looks for patterns, analogies, and hidden relationships between ideas that appear unrelated. This is called analogical reasoning, the ability to transfer insight from one context to another. When engineers studied bird flight to design airplanes, they were practicing analogical reasoning. When African inventors turned discarded parts into irrigation pumps, or when musicians blend ancient rhythms with modern sound, they are using the same mental bridge, seeing connections others overlook. The ability to link distant ideas is what transforms creativity from imagination into innovation. Divergent and convergent thinking are two mental processes that together fuel creative problem solving. Divergent thinking is expansive. It generates multiple ideas, perspectives, and possibilities without immediate judgment. It asks open-ended questions. What else could this be? How else might this work? In this stage, the mind wanders freely, connecting distant concepts and exploring wild options. Convergent thinking, on the other hand, narrows those ideas down. It evaluates, tests, and refines them until the most practical solution emerges. The balance between divergence and convergence is like breathing. One expands, the other focuses. Too much divergence creates chaos. Too much convergence kills innovation. True creativity lies in their rhythm. In practice, creative problem solving often begins with reframing the problem itself. When you redefine the question, you redefine the possibilities. Instead of asking, "How can I fix this?" a creative thinker might ask, "How can I redesign this so it doesn't need fixing?" The way you frame a problem determines the kind of solution your brain searches for. That's why lateral thinkers spend more time understanding the problem from new perspectives before leaping to answers. They know that the solution often hides inside the question. One of the most effective techniques for cultivating creative thought is brainstorming. When done correctly, brainstorming suspends judgment and invites freedom. Every idea, no matter how absurd, is allowed space. In this environment, the brain feels safe to wander, and unexpected connections begin to emerge. The most transformative ideas often sound ridiculous at first. When Einstein proposed that time and space were relative, the idea seemed absurd. When African innovators began transforming old car parts into generators for remote villages, skeptics laughed. Yet these unconventional ideas reshaped understanding and improved lives precisely because they challenged what was normal. Another mental exercise for creativity is the what-if scenario. Asking, what if, stretches the imagination into realms not yet explored. What if gravity could be manipulated? What if transportation didn't rely on fuel? What if learning happened entirely through virtual reality? These questions spark mental exploration without the burden of immediate practicality. They train the brain to think in possibilities rather than limitations. Over time, this habit rewires perception, making innovation a natural reflex instead of a rare event. Creative problem-solving also thrives on constraints. Paradoxically, limitations can enhance creativity by forcing the mind to think resourcefully. Many African entrepreneurs exemplify this principle. In environments with scarce resources, they innovate through necessity, turning waste into wealth, scarcity into invention. Solar-powered lamps made from plastic bottles, water filters built from charcoal, and drone delivery systems for medical supplies are examples of creativity born from constraint. When resources are limited, imagination becomes the most valuable currency. The stories of great innovators across history reveal one common thread. They refuse to see failure as final. To a creative mind, failure is not the end of thought, but the beginning of deeper inquiry. Thomas Edison famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Einstein, too, saw mistakes as essential stepping stones to understanding. Creativity requires the courage to experiment and the humility to learn from error. Each misstep refines awareness, strengthens intuition, and clarifies direction. In this sense, failure becomes feedback, a creative ally rather than an adversary. Emotion also plays a vital role in creativity. Inspiration is often born from deep emotional experiences, curiosity, frustration, joy, or wonder. Emotional energy fuels imagination by connecting thought to passion. However, emotion must be balanced by discipline. Without focus, creativity becomes scattered. Without emotion, it becomes mechanical. The greatest problem solvers unite both, using passion to drive exploration and logic to shape expression. Creativity is not limited to artists or inventors. It belongs equally to entrepreneurs, teachers, parents, and scientists. A parent finding new ways to communicate with a child is engaging in creative problem solving. A teacher rethinking lessons to reach distracted students is practicing innovation. A doctor designing new ways to treat patients with minimal resources is a lateral thinker. Creativity, in its essence, is adaptability, the ability to find new pathways when the old ones are blocked. To strengthen creative thinking, one must create environments that encourage curiosity and experimentation. This means asking better questions, embracing ambiguity, and allowing space for play. Playfulness unlocks creativity because it frees the mind from the fear of failure. When you engage with a problem playfully, you explore without pressure. You think in metaphors, experiment with absurdity, and discover insights hidden beneath the serious surface of reason. Great inventors often resemble children at play, curious, fearless, and endlessly imaginative. Creativity also grows in diversity. Exposure to different cultures, disciplines, and experiences expands the brain's network of associations. When an engineer studies music or a poet studies physics, cross-pollination occurs. New connections form between seemingly unrelated fields. Many groundbreaking ideas are born from this collision of disciplines. The fusion of African rhythm and Western jazz, the blending of technology with art, or the integration of ancient herbal medicine with modern pharmacology, all are results of creative intersection. Creative problem solving is not about thinking harder. It's about thinking differently. It's about allowing the mind to roam beyond the boundaries of the known and trust that something new can emerge. It's about seeing the invisible thread that connects ideas and having the courage to follow it. Creative thinkers don't wait for perfect conditions. They create possibilities where none seem to exist. In a world that changes faster than ever, the ability to think laterally is not optional. It is survival. Rigid thinking cannot keep pace with evolving challenges. The problems of tomorrow, climate change, technological ethics, social equity, will not be solved by recycled ideas of yesterday. They demand minds that can merge science with imagination, reason with empathy, and structure with innovation. Every person has the potential to think this way. Creativity is not a mysterious gift. It is a muscle strengthened through practice. It grows when you challenge assumptions, explore what makes you curious, and give yourself permission to think without limits. As you cultivate this habit, you begin to see opportunities where others see obstacles, and solutions where others see dead ends. When you train your brain to think creatively, you become more than a problem solver. You become a possibility maker. You no longer wait for circumstances to align. You reshape them with imagination and intent. You see not only what is, but what could be. And that, ultimately, is the essence of creative intelligence. The ability to transform limitation into invention, to turn questions into pathways, and to use the power of thought to outsmart the impossible. Chapter 7. Living with a Critical Mindset. To train the mind is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of a new way of living. The ultimate goal of critical thinking is not merely to solve problems, win arguments, or make better decisions, but to live with awareness, purpose, and wisdom. It is to move through the world with clarity amid confusion, composure amid chaos, and curiosity amid conformity. Living with a critical mindset means transforming thinking from a skill into a way of being, a habit that shapes every perception, choice, and conversation. A critical mindset is a lifestyle of conscious engagement with reality. It is waking up each day not as a passive receiver of information, but as an active interpreter of it. It means questioning rather than assuming, listening to understand rather than to respond, and analyzing rather than reacting. Most people drift through life on mental autopilot, accepting whatever narrative is loudest, following trends without reflection, and letting emotions dictate direction. The critical thinker walks a different path, one of intentional observation and deliberate response. At the heart of this mindset is a commitment to lifelong learning. The mind, like a muscle, grows only through consistent challenge. To stop learning is to begin decaying. The critical thinker understands that knowledge is infinite and truth is layered. No single perspective holds it all. Each day becomes an opportunity to learn something new, to read, to listen, to question, and to refine understanding. This humility toward knowledge keeps the brain flexible and the spirit grounded. It reminds us that being wrong is not failure. It is part of the process of becoming wiser. Reading analytically is one of the habits that nourishes this way of life. Instead of consuming words passively, the critical reader engages with them. They question the author's assumptions, trace the logic of arguments, and compare ideas against real-world evidence. They do not simply read to agree or disagree. They read to understand, to expand their thinking, and to sharpen discernment. Analytical reading transforms books into conversations between minds across time. It builds the habit of inquiry, the practice of asking, what is being said, and why should I believe it? In an age of endless information and shallow opinions, this habit is a shield against manipulation. The critical thinker does not surrender their judgment to headlines, influencers, or trending opinions. They question sources, verify claims, and seek balance. They understand that media, even when factual, often reflects bias, and that truth requires effort to uncover. This vigilance protects not only the intellect, but the integrity of one's worldview. It is the difference between being informed and being influenced. Living critically also means listening differently. Conversations are no longer battles of ego or opportunities to be right. They become explorations of thought. The critical listener hears beneath words, sensing motives, emotions, and context. They can disagree without hostility and challenge ideas without disrespect. Their goal is not to dominate, but to understand. Such listening deepens relationships, builds empathy, and turns dialogue into growth. Every exchange becomes a mirror reflecting new dimensions of human complexity. Adaptability is another hallmark of a critical mindset. Life changes constantly, and those who cling rigidly to old beliefs often suffer the most when confronted with new realities. The adaptable thinker can pivot without panic because they value truth over comfort. They are not attached to being right. They are attached to learning. When new evidence contradicts their previous view, they adjust with grace rather than defensiveness. This mental flexibility is the foundation of resilience. It allows one to thrive in uncertainty instead of being consumed by it. Intellectual humility is the quiet strength that anchors this adaptability. It is the awareness that knowledge is vast, that human perception is limited, and that wisdom often lies beyond personal experience. The humble mind does not confuse confidence with certainty. It seeks dialogue over domination and truth over validation. This humility is not weakness. It is the highest form of intelligence because it keeps the mind open and the heart teachable. It prevents arrogance from blinding insight and allows one to learn from anyone, anywhere. To live with a critical mindset is also to cultivate clarity under chaos. In moments of pressure, political, social, emotional, the untrained mind becomes reactive, echoing the noise of the crowd. The trained mind, however, pauses. It filters emotion through reason and filters reason through empathy. It knows that clarity is not found in panic, but in stillness. The critical thinker becomes a calm center in turbulent environments, able to make sound decisions because they are grounded in awareness, not driven by confusion. This composure is built through daily mental discipline. Just as an athlete trains their body, a thinker trains their awareness. Every time you question before reacting, analyze before assuming, or reflect before responding, you strengthen neural pathways of clarity. Over time, these become automatic, your default mode of operation. You begin to navigate life not through impulse, but through intention. The more you practice this, the less chaos outside can disturb the peace within. A critical mindset also transforms how one perceives challenges. Instead of seeing problems as interruptions, the thinker sees them as invitations to evolve. Every setback becomes data, every disappointment a lesson in perspective. This mindset replaces complaint with curiosity. When something goes wrong, the questions shift from "why me?" to "what is this teaching me?" This subtle but powerful shift transforms adversity into opportunity. It builds a resilient intelligence that not only survives hardship, but extracts wisdom from it. Critical living is also conscious living. It means being aware of how you spend your time, what you feed your mind, and the energy you project into the world. It means choosing intentional consumption over distraction. Instead of scrolling endlessly through opinions, you focus on ideas that nourish growth. You practice reflection, solitude, and meaningful dialogue. You take time to think deeply in a culture that rewards superficiality. In this way, you reclaim your mind from noise and redirect it toward purpose. Wisdom, the final product of critical living, is born from this union of awareness and experience. It is not just knowledge accumulated, but understanding refined through reflection. A wise person is not one who knows everything, but one who sees clearly, acts thoughtfully, and speaks intentionally. They are not easily swayed by trends or troubled by uncertainty, because they have built their foundation on truth rather than opinion. Wisdom turns intelligence into light. It guides without arrogance and influences without control. Living with a critical mindset is not about becoming skeptical of everything. It's about becoming aware of everything. It's not cynicism, it's consciousness. It's learning to question, not to doubt life, but to understand it more deeply. It's choosing to think when the world encourages reaction, to reflect when the crowd demands haste, and to remain grounded when emotion runs wild. This mindset, when fully developed, radiates through all areas of life. In relationships, it brings understanding instead of assumption. In work, it brings clarity instead of confusion. In decision-making, it brings foresight instead of fear. It turns the ordinary moments of life into exercises in awareness and growth. You begin to see that every conversation, every challenge, and every emotion is an opportunity to practice mastery of thought. To live with a critical mindset is to live awake, to no longer move through life half-aware, half-alive, reacting to circumstances instead of shaping them. It is to become intentional about how you perceive, decide, and act. It is to think independently, yet humbly, to feel deeply, yet wisely, to lead yourself before attempting to lead others. When you reach this stage, you realize that intelligence was never about how much you know. It was about how clearly you see. The trained mind is not one that merely collects facts, but one that filters truth, disciplines emotion, and aligns thought with purpose. This way of living makes you not only effective but peaceful, not only intelligent but wise. The world today needs more minds that think this way, minds that can cut through deception, listen to reason, and act with empathy. It needs thinkers who question not to destroy, but to build, who analyze not to dominate, but to understand. In a society flooded with information, but starved of reflection, those who live critically become beacons of clarity and strength. As this audiobook comes to an end, the call is not to perfection, but to awareness. Let your mind remain open, your questions alive, and your learning endless. Let every experience refine your judgment, and every reflection deepen your understanding. In doing so, you will not merely navigate life. You will outsmart it, shape it, and rise above it with the grace of a mind trained not just to think, but to see. That is the art of living with a critical mindset. It is the lifelong practice of wisdom in motion, a journey of self-mastery that turns thought into strength and awareness into power.